Hey, good morning, everybody. I am so glad you joined me once again. Welcome. And I am sitting here in the parking lot at Scotts Valley High School, and I am just blown away by the views that I have. I love this time of year. The hills are green. Uh, right now, the sky is blue, but there's these big, puffy white clouds. As I look to my right, I see horses grazing. As I look to my left, there's birds of prey that are just kind of soaring, hovering over the hills. And I'm reminded of why I'm so blessed to live where I live. And I'm reminded of why my rent is so dang high. Nevertheless, I want to bring to you this morning some thoughts and some meditations as we do a slow, scenic route walk through Psalm 23. In fact, today I want to spend some more time just looking at the second word of that psalm. It's the word Lord. And like I said yesterday, anytime you see in the Old Testament the word Lord in all caps, it is referring to the very unique, distinct, special, proper name of God. It's not just a title, it's not just a position. It is God coming near and revealing himself to us by giving us his name. We're first introduced to this proper name of God in Exodus when Moses encounters God in the burning bush. You might remember the story, maybe you saw the movie. Moses is out tending the sheep, and suddenly he sees this bush on fire, but the bush is not being consumed. Now, what would you do if you saw something on fire out in the wilderness? You probably wouldn't draw near. But Moses decides, mostly out of curiosity, to see what's going on with this fire. And as he draws near the fire, he hears the voice of God that says, "Take off your shoes, for you are on holy ground." I love that. I love that because think about this. How can an unholy person draw near to a holy God? How can an unrighteous man or woman draw near and come close to a holy, righteous, and perfect God? And yet in this scene, we see this beautiful scene where God, who is holy, invites Moses, a murderer, to come near. You know, it's interesting. A professor up in the Oregon area, every time he got a new set of students in, every semester, he would invite these students to write down a description of themselves. And they'd take about 10 minutes and do that, and then he'd give them another assignment and another piece of paper, and he would invite them to write down their understanding and description of who Jesus is. And this was his observation over and over and over again. About 90% of the time, there was no difference. No difference between the student and their description of themselves and their description of Jesus. Isn't that interesting? You see, for most people, God is merely a projection of themselves. God is a projection of who they imagine him to be. Put another way, most of us, most people, make God in our own image. And if you think about this, this is very convenient for us because now we have a God that is tame. Now we have a God that we can control. Now we have this vending machine God where we put in the right coins, push the right buttons, and boom, we get what we want. Now we have a God that likes the things we like, that dislikes the things we dislike. And by the way, now we have a God who votes the way we vote. And we wonder why we are so bored with God. We wonder why we are so bored with God. You see, if you don't have a God that at times crosses you, if you don't have a God that at times disagrees with you, if you don't have a God that at times contradicts you, then guess what? Your God is probably a figment of your own imagination. and it is not the God who really is. You see, the Bible is clear that we cannot really know God in and of ourselves. We can't find God. We can't understand who God is unless God reveals himself to us. And that is exactly what God did over and over and over in the Old Testament. He would give them little glimpses, little peeks into who he was. And we can understand who God is in great measure by the titles and by the names that he gives the people of Israel. But did you know that we cannot really and fully understand who God is until we get to the New Testament? And the New Testament teaches us that Jesus is fully God and fully man. And that blows our minds away. We can't really understand what that means. But essentially it means that if we want to know what God is like, look at Jesus. If we want to know who God is, look at Jesus. In John chapter 8, I read this last week in my daily reading. Jesus has this encounter with the religious leaders. Jesus is very popular. His fame is at its height. And the religious people are jealous and they're envious because people are flocking to Jesus in hordes. But they get in this argument and this discussion with Jesus about who Jesus is and where does Jesus get his authority. And Jesus makes this statement that really offends the religious people. He says, "Your father is the devil." And the religious people counter with, "No, our father is Abraham." And Jesus then responds like this. He says, "Before Abraham was, I am." And they knew exactly what he was referring to. He was referring to that encounter that Moses had with God in the burning bush. You see, Moses was finally convinced, he finally conceded that he would go to Pharaoh and he would lead the people of Israel out of Egypt and out of slavery. But he wanted to go with some backing, he wanted to go with some authority, and so he asked God, "Whom shall I say sent me?" And God responded this way, "Tell them that I am sent you." That is the literal translation in English, I am. And when Jesus said, "Before Abraham was, I am," Jesus was claiming to be Yahweh, to be the God of the Old Testament that these religious leaders claim to believe in and claim to follow. You see, we don't have the option to make up who God is or to make up what God is like. And so as I close, I want you to say a simple prayer. A.W. Tozer gives us this prayer, and it goes simply like this. God, I want to want you. I want to want you. In other words, I know I'm supposed to want you, but if I'm honest, that scares me. If I'm honest, maybe I really don't want what you want for me, and maybe I really don't want you. But that is a bold and audacious prayer. If you can just admit that some of who you think God is just a figment of your imagination, and if you can cry out to God and pray to God, "God, I want to want what you want, and I want to know you for who you really are, not who I imagine you to be." And so I invite you once again, as you slow down and as you attempt to be still. And I know you're getting restless. I'm getting antsy. I'm getting restless with this sheltering in place. And I cannot wait till it ends. I cannot wait to be in a group of people. I cannot wait to preach to live people at my church. And yet we have to wait. We have to be patient. And so as you slow down and try to minimize the anxious feelings, simply say a prayer. God, I want to want you. I want you more than I want what I want from you or what you can give me. God, help me to want you. God bless you, and I hope you have a great day as you meditate and as you think about who God is and who he is for you. I'll talk to you tomorrow.